Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So this is part 2 of the root causes of narcissism, and I wanted to speak to some delicate subjects. So I'm putting out a disclaimer right away and a trigger warning, because these subjects might be a little bit alarming to some people. And it is very important for me to speak to these specific topics because of my own experience with it. Hi, Olivia. So, the root causes of narcissism that I want to speak to today. One is the interesting thing that I've observed through my through the work that I do and through counseling others and just holding space for others, is that the narcissist doesn't actually usually know that they're a narcissist. They don't understand how they're affecting others. And in my experience of someone who is operating in that way, it's that they are in an extreme level of pain, and they're suffering. And also, they are conditioned and raised that way, usually, by another narcissist, a parent who's a narcissist, or someone in their family who's a narcissist, like a sibling. And so, they may go from being a victim to a narcissist. So it kind of, the victim has a narcissistic element to it, and people don't actually realize that. So we want to look at why these things are happening and what we can do to support those that are experiencing the narcissistic tendencies within themselves and, potentially hurting others in relationships. And so for me, I grew up, just a real brief about me, I grew up with a narcissistic father, rageaholic, alcoholic father, and I grew up with a victim mother, so victim martyr, narcissistic mother. So I had 2 narcissistic parents, and I was a caretaker, and I was accommodating, and I was always enabling them to stay sick. So through my process of recovery and looking at my part in everything in my life, I realized that I had taken on these behavioral patterns of narcissism, and fortunately for me, I was honest with myself and willing to look at how these things had affected myself and other people. And I'm not saying that I'm always perfect, far from it, but it's like I'm willing to look. I'm willing to look at, what I'm doing and how it's affecting others. So that's a key element that other people, narcissists, don't always take into consideration. But here's what's interesting, okay? What I have found, because I've worked with several, is that they're disconnected from their heart space. And so once they drop into their heart, everything changes, and they have an awakening process where they realize what has happened and what they've done, and they feel horrible about it. And that's part of coming into incarnation as well, and embodying your physical body with your soul essence, with your spark, your soul spark. So what I have observed is that a lot of these people who are narcissistic aren't actually embodied. They're not actually, fully occupying their space, their physical space. And so they're programmed to be a specific way, and it's like they're missing key elements of heart-centered relations, right? So they're disconnected from their heart, and they are not embodied, meaning they're not actually occupying their physical body. So this is where I wanted to speak to today, is the factors and the elements present with someone who's disembodied, who's not actually in their body, because a lot of things can happen that, wreak havoc on other people's lives and create a lot of tension and drama and conflict and hurt a lot of people in the process. And they hurt themselves. The bottom line is people are hurting themselves all the time. And they don't even realize that they're doing it. So just to say that I don't want to scare anybody by what I'm going to talk about, but I think it's time to really speak to these things, to really speak to what's really going on. And especially now with what's happening on the planet. So we all know at this point that there has been some level of control on our society and the way that things operate. And the way that this infiltrates humanity and human relational patterns is this. In my experience, and this is not like I believe this, but it's in my experience, and my personal experience, and from working with others, what I have seen is that, and observed, is that there are specific traits that are not human traits. They're interdimensional traits. There's an absence of a heart-centered intelligence. So when someone's disconnected from their heart, there's a few things to look for. One, is this person disassociated most of the time? Two, is this person dissociating in the moment? Are they actually really there? Are they really present to what they're doing? That's a really big one. Are they aware that they're not present, right? Because most of the time, if they're acting crazy or they're acting out of sorts or they're consistently doing some behavioral pattern that's harming someone else, chances are they're not embodied. Their soul is not in their body. So that's a really key pinpointed thing that we can look at and say, oh my God, this person actually isn't there. They're disassociated. So something else may be moving through them. So what I call that, not to scare anybody, but I call it interdimensional. So some kind of an interdimensional energy may be moving through the space and affecting the behavioral pattern of that particular person. And this could be us too. I mean, everyone can be influenced by these interdimensional energies and influenced to act in particular ways, unless we have control of our personal energetic matrix, right? And that's what's so important, is embodying and fully being present in the now moment, every single moment, to know and discern what's going on in any given moment. So a dear friend of mine wrote a book called The Love Bite. So anyone who has a relationship with a narcissist, or someone who has been in relationship with a narcissist, there's another factor usually involved. And so it's called The Love Bite, and there's also The Dark Side of Cupid. And both of these books were written by Eve Lorgen. And evelorgen.com, you can find her online, and she wrote these amazing books. And she's been doing research for like 25 years or more actually now around these certain types of scenarios, relationship scenarios. And she's got a lot of information. And so what we have discovered is that anomalous trauma is present with these experiences. So we may not understand why we're being traumatized or that there's trauma present, but there's like a certain element of trauma that goes along with narcissism. And so anyone who has PTSD, for example, and in my opinion, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, practically the entire population of America has PTSD, and possibly the world. We are under so much bombardment, of energetic bombardment, constantly. Every single day we're being bombarded energetically to the point where our nervous system is reacting to that. And so a lot of people are having symptoms of PTSD. And so those people that are raised to be narcissistic, or they come from a narcissistic parent, they are going to initially react in a narcissistic way, right? They're going to be self-preservation first. That's going to be their first and foremost reaction to a situation, a stimuli, which is causing trauma or some kind of alarm, right? They're going to go into self-preservation first, rather than someone else who would be like, oh, how can I help? You know, what can I do right now to help anyone else, right? They'll go straight to, I need to take care of myself. This is what I got to do. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, right? The me first thing. So what happens is when someone is narcissistic, it's because they're disconnected from their heart center, their heart-centered intelligence, and they're only operating from their emotional body, usually, which is also connected straight to the mind. So the emotional body is usually only centered in the mind unless you drop into the heart space. And then when you drop into the heart space, that is when you can sit and actually feel what's happening around you, because it's more of a centered space that you're receiving from, right? So when someone's only in their head, they don't have the capacity to really understand and receive the stimuli coming back at them that's from someone else. If someone else is reacting to them or being affected by them, they can't even see it, right? And again, they're not occupying their soul essence, is not occupying their physical encasement, their physical embodiment. Because if it was, they wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't even be, that's interesting. We're just going to wait for that to... I might need to do a part 2 to this video if it doesn't stop. Oh my God, and there's somebody in the car. That's hilarious. Hello! Deliver interference. So, there we go. So, yeah, back to what I was saying about not occupying the physical body. So, when the child, the person that is a narcissist, when they're a child, a couple of options are available in terms of what might have happened. One is they're severely abused, and they are they're like this, you know, they're literally like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm, you know, what's going to happen when he walks in the door. You know what I mean? So they become, to overcompensate for that, they become either completely invisible and go into the narcissistic shyness, invisibility, and, you know, like timid, I can't talk to people, agoraphobia. That's also narcissism. Or they'll overcompensate and fight, right? They'll go into fight or flight, and so everything becomes a fight to survive and to take up space. So they take up way more space than is appropriate usually in any given situation. So when that happens, a lot of times other people's energy bodies are like, whoa, dude, what the yo, balance, yo, like, whoa, you're like way, you know, you're invading my space, you know, so it becomes like an energetically sensitive dynamic that takes place when you're not balancing your energy body and realizing that you're not occupying your space, so you're occupying more than what's yours. And so it's like all of these different levels of how this plays itself out, right? And so to me, for me personally, in my personal experience, I had both going on. I was a victim, right? I was being pummeled and abused as a child in many different ways: physical, verbal, mental, emotional, other things. And, you know, so I was a victim. So my way of dealing with that was to fight back, you know. I had to scream to be heard, right? And so as I got older, for me, you know, I was raised to be an elitist. I was raised to be holier than thou. I was raised to be arrogant, quite frankly. And it was really, because I had to be perfect, right? I had to be perfect. I had to be the top of my class. I had to, and it was never good enough, right? Never good enough. And so there was this unreasonable, superhuman expectation of me, and I wasn't able to live up to it ever. So there was this constant like barrage of negativity coming at me because I wasn't living up to the expectations that were absolutely unrealistic of me. But what it did is it left me with this like, I have to perform just to be, right? And then I was living in Los Angeles for 20 years, which I believe breeds narcissistic tendencies. Because in order to be somebody in Los Angeles, you have to be larger than life, right? And so for me, those are all ways that I became narcissistic and self-involved. And it wasn't until I got my ass kicked enough times that and humbled myself that I realized what was happening. And so now, if I become narcissistic in any way, or I take up too much space and someone's reacting to my energy body, I know right away. And also, people are calling me out, which is great because I need to know when I'm overstepping my boundaries, right? But most people that are narcissistic, they cannot hear that. They'll become offended, they'll feel like they're being victimized, or they'll just be nasty and just throw people away and cut them off, right? So to look at it then from another angle of when someone is that self-involved, right? The bottom line is that person is screaming to be heard, like begging for love, and really in a tremendous amount of pain. It may not seem like that on the outside, but their heart, their inner child is screaming to be heard and really needs someone to tell them that they're okay, And I have been able to tap into people, me personally, and narcissistic people, and help them wake up or find awareness around their own level of self-involvement and how it's not serving them. And through that process, I've given them unconditional love. Not necessarily tolerance, right? But unconditional love. So that's the biggest piece, is that unconditional love is something that we all need. We all need to feel like it's okay for us to take up space on the planet, period, right? And so allowing someone to be in their narcissism and love them anyway is huge, And what that does is it's when their soul is disconnected and their soul's like behind themselves, it becomes safer for them to embody and occupy their physical encasement, right? And so a lot of times, narcissists are not actually embodied. They're being hosted by they're being the host of an interdimensional. And so dealing with that specifically can be difficult. And, unless you have tools for that and know exactly how to go about that to release those spirits, that can be a very dangerous road to go down. So there's other ways to go about it until such time as that person can recognize that. I will answer that question. That's a beautiful question, Terry. So this person, whoever it is, a narcissistic person, needs to recognize that they are acting out of alignment with their own soul's directive, which is, as an organic human, soul embodied, would not treat someone with that sort of behavior. They would not abuse someone if they're in their heart. When someone's in their heart, they don't abuse others. It's just the way it is, right? So dropping them into their heart is the biggest goal, obviously, to get a narcissist to realize what's happening. But if they don't feel safe, they're not going to drop into their heart. So it's a matter of them feeling safe. So first things first, does this person feel safe to even occupy their physical encasement, right? Asking these questions of yourself, like, okay, what's really going on with this person, right? Are they in their body? Are they occupying their space? Do they feel safe? Chances are they don't feel safe, because if they did, they would be occupying their body, right? So usually when someone is a narcissist, it's because they're not occupying their physical body. And so something else is moving through them, okay? So we're dealing with other factors, right? And I'm not saying that every single narcissist is hosting an interdimensional. I'm not saying that at all, because there are people that grew up and were programmed and trained to be narcissistic, and that's just what they know, and they don't know anything different, right? And so until they drop into their heart space, they don't actually know how to change that for themselves. And they don't recognize that they're actually even doing it, right? It's just who they are. It's so core fundamentally who they are that they don't actually see that they're even abusing others, which is mind-blowing, but it's true. You know, like people, when they're raised in a narcissistic environment, that's all they know. And they literally don't understand that they're being narcissistic. So it's about observing where they are in their consciousness, just observing, not judging or projecting or even dealing with it at all. It's just really like stepping back and observing. Yes, exactly. They think that they're okay and everyone else is wrong. And that is a narcissistic tendency, because they're self-involved and the world is against them or for them, right? So that dynamic is a narcissistic dynamic. And so it's hard for me to it's hard for me to read and talk at the same time. So I'm going to answer Terry's question because I feel like it's super important. So a lot of times narcissistic people and who have those tendencies, they aren't even aware that they're abusing someone else. Or if they are, chances are they feel justified in their anger, right? And so they don't even consider the other person's anything. They just think it's okay for them to act the way that they're acting. But that comes from the conditioned programming from childhood, right? From the way that their parents raised them. So those are all conditioned belief systems that have to be broken down one by one in order for them to disconnect and understand and recalibrate and integrate, so that they understand that they are actually hurting someone else, right? That it's not just about them. So there's many factors here, but the biggest factor that I wanted to talk about today was the actual the interdimensional influence that is present, right? So when someone isn't occupying their physical encasement, it is way easier for an interdimensional to come in and occupy that space, right? So if someone's drinking, or someone's smoking pot, or someone's smoking cigarettes, or someone's compulsively eating, or someone's a sex addict, and someone's spending money compulsively, there's so many ways that addictions can show up. So I do believe it's connected to the addictive process that people have in their realities, right? So the addictive is also a way that people are not embodied, so that they're checking out, right? They're self-medicating because they're in so much pain, but they don't know how to take care of it. They don't know how to embody. Really, that's the bottom line, is they don't feel safe. Again, back to being energetically safe, right? So how can we as a collective help each other to feel safe? Like, that's first and foremost, it's their inner child that doesn't feel safe, right? And if you were to speak to a narcissist in a specific way, they turn into a child immediately. They immediately drop into child mode, and you can see that they're actually a child operating, right? That there's some level of potentially arrested development in them, where at some point they stopped growing and they got stuck in a pattern of behavior that then rules their life, right? So this is about behavioral patterns, conditioning from childhood, not being embodied because they're disassociated, and not feeling safe to occupy their own space or take up space on the planet. So all of those factors are involved in the root causes of why narcissists are who they are, right? So what can we do to support that person, that soul, that being, in coming into right relations with themselves and in coming into right relations with others, so that they are able to see and witness in themselves that they are disconnected from their heart space, right? And their heart space is maybe offline. So how do we connect and drop into our heart? What do we do to help connect people into our hearts, or connect ourselves into our hearts? We go into nature, right? A big one is nature. And in the city environments, there isn't a lot of nature available. So what is another way that we can utilize dropping into our heart space? Baths, water, taking a shower, some kind of elemental involvement with the physical piezoelectric energy body of the physical person that can shift the energy into a space where they can drop down enough that they can tap into their heart and be calm. So a lot of times narcissists never ever relax. And if they do, they're relaxing from I'm relaxing. It's like, you're not really relaxing. You're actually just puffed up. And so it's like, but then there's the victims that are hiding in their house, the agoraphobics, and the people that are scared to be outside because their energy bodies are so sensitive that they can't actually even face the world anymore because it's so intense, the amount of bombardment that is coming from outside influences like electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies, wireless technology, all kinds of things, geoengineering, for example, disasters, bombardment from the internet, and constant being fed information coming in. It's an overload for everybody. It's an overload of information that is coming in constantly. So every single person has a different way of coping with that, right? And narcissists tend to cope with it by overcompensating for their sensitivities so that they can rise above it. So sometimes it's not even that they're trying to hurt anyone else. They're trying to survive. They're in survival mode, right? Because they don't feel safe. So that is a key piece of information for us to look at, which is how can we support this person that's in survival mode, that is oversensitized, that is completely overcompensating for the sensitivity and has disassociated from their physical body, has gone into their pattern of behavior, right? And is disconnected from their heart. What can we do for that person? Not, they'll never change, they're always going to be the same, they're always going to just think that they're right and everyone else is wrong and blah, 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 blah. It's like that projection is like black magic. I'm sorry, but it is. So we can't continue to project onto the other person, even if they're being hateful and harmful to us. If the only way I know how to dismantle that is with unconditional love, period. It's the only thing I've ever found that drops somebody back down into their heart, okay? And unconditional love doesn't mean tolerance, and it doesn't mean allowing someone to abuse you, right? So then we have to look at ourselves and how we are operating within our encasement. Are we actually centered and grounded in our hearts? Are we sovereign in our energetic bodies? Are we paying attention to how we're treating others? And are we projecting onto the other person, right? So it's like we may be feeling unsafe. We may be feeling disconnected from our hearts. So the first thing to do is obviously check in. Are we actually physically embodied at this moment? Are we fully present for what's happening, or have we disassociated because we're feeling unsafe, right? So first thing we got to do is get safe in our bodies, right? And then step back, observe the person, and be able to check in and say, like those questions that I said before, which is this person physically in their body right now? Or is their soul occupying the space? Or is it something else that's occupying the space? What's really going on? Are they in survival mode? Are they acting from a place of fear or ego? Ego's, synonymous with fear on some level. Ego also comes from the negative ego, which is the inner child that is kicking and screaming to actually be heard and is really asking for love, asking for unconditional love. So I'm repeating the same things over and over again because people are coming on, but I also feel like I'm kind of drilling it home as to the fact that we are here to support the movement of this energy, this narcissism energy, releasing itself from the collective. So as an overall perspective here, this cannot continue, but we've been literally bombarded with things that, are designed to keep us in our narcissistic tendencies and to be self-absorbed and impulse shopping, for example. All these things are like instant gratification, right? So it's breeding narcissists. And then we have narcissistic parents raising narcissistic children. So it's like, how do we break the cycle of narcissism? So that's part 3 that I'm going to talk about. And I might potentially have a guest for that because a friend and I, we've been talking about this for a really long time. And we've been, both of us have our own level of narcissistic tendencies that we have admitted to within ourselves. And so we've had to do a lot of work on ourselves to come to a place where we understand the ins and outs of narcissism and how it affects our environment and the people that we relate to. So I'm excited because I feel like this is such a huge topic right now. It's like a hot topic. And I feel moved to speak about it because I have my own experience with it, but I also have experience with working with others on this level. And so, again, the Love Bite and The Dark Side of Cupid by Eve Lorgen, evelorgen.com. Those books specifically touch on relationships with people that have narcissistic tendencies and have potentially hosted interdimensional beings working through them. And so that's a really big eye-opener in terms of looking at the narcissistic tendencies in people, is being willing to see that it might not be them actually moving through their space, right? And recognizing that there's something else going on there and getting help, right? And but not necessarily taking it on ourselves if we don't really know what we're dealing with, right? But it is a factor. It's definitely a factor. I'm not saying everybody has it, but it is a predominant factor in a lot of these circumstances that I have found when I've worked with people, is that that person is hosted. So, and once that hosting is gone, everything changes. I mean, everything changes about that person. So it is possible, and I do believe that healing is possible, and I do believe the cycle is breakable, and I've seen it happen in my own life, and I've seen it happen in many other people's lives, and we can do it. We can do anything we want to do, actually, and we can intend and create anything that we want to create. So let's create something on this planet that is of value and authenticity so that each person feels safe in occupying their physical encasement, that they actually can embody here on planet Earth, and that they feel like it's okay to be here. Seriously, okay to be here. So, blessings to you all. Thank you for joining me. I am hoping to do part 3 soon, very soon. And if you just now joined and you're just, you know, coming around, please feel free to watch the whole video. Okay? Blessings.